Good morning, friends. Today I'm sitting down with a warm beverage and all of the questions that you submitted over on the community tab or on Instagram earlier this week. You guys had so many wonderful questions, so I'm just gonna hop into it today in the interest of time. So I'm gonna start over on the YouTube community tab. The first question from Goth Grandmom 13. How is Tara liking the new setup? So I'm gonna speak about this, I guess, in relation to the van or the bus. I think the van was all she knew. So she was pretty comfortable pretty quickly because when I brought her home, it was to my parents' house in a kennel temporarily, like while I was working. But for the most part, she just moved straight into the van and really liked it. I will say that she didn't love being up in the bed area because she was so tiny, I think. But that also carried over to the bus, which was interesting because it's very different in the truck camper. And I'll say in the truck camper as it was when we were traveling through Idaho and Oregon, because obviously right now we're not living in it. But overall, she really loves it. Next question is from Sigra Desparks 16. How did you get yourself ready mentally and emotionally to do your build? What did you do to make sure you didn't let the frustrations get to you? Well, if you saw the video yesterday, you know that sometimes they definitely do get to me. And I think that's just normal human behavior. We're all gonna get frustrated at some point over something. And so it's not so much about preventing myself from getting frustrated as it is just rolling with the punches. And when something goes wrong, yesterday was an extreme example of that. Usually things don't go that terribly wrong, but it's just centering myself and grounding myself and realizing that most things, if not all things, are fixable, and that it just might take me stepping away from that present circumstance to figure it out and to repair it. Otherwise, I would say just employing a sometimes shit happens mentality is the best way to go, and that's what I've tried to do, and I think it's actually carried over into a lot of other aspects of my life, which was an unexpected benefit for sure. All right, next question is from Meep Mop Moop. I like your username. Out of all the places you've traveled, if tomorrow you had to pick a city and a state to live forever, where would that be? That's a really great question, and a couple of places come to mind. I always say that if I could afford to live in my hometown, I would, but unfortunately it's gotten extremely expensive there, and I don't see myself being able to or wanting to afford something there and having to constantly be stressed over the amount of money that I'm making simply to exist and have a place to live. So then the next place that comes to mind is Bend, Oregon, because I've spent so much time up there in the past couple of years just traveling in the van or the bus this summer. I went back up there with the truck camper and spent quite a bit of time early on in winter this year. And I love it there because of the proximity to nature, but also this deep sense of community that I feel, not just amongst nomads, but at the coffee shops that I regular and the breweries that I visited. People just seem to know each other, and there's a really great sense of community, especially in outdoor spaces there, that I love. That said, it's very expensive to live there. And so I think that that would be, it would be at this point in my life out of reach to move there permanently. I could see myself renting in Bend in the future, or maybe purchasing a piece of land there and then building something small of my own. But it would have to be outside of the city limits, I'm sure, because I can't even imagine how expensive a piece of land in the city of Bend would be. That was kind of a long way around, and I didn't even really answer your question. I guess in this moment, if I had to choose some place to live permanently and never leave, it would probably be somewhere in Colorado. I absolutely love the state. I have family there, and there's plenty of places in Colorado that I could live more affordably than these bigger cities that I've been to, while still maintaining the aspects of my life that I cherish, like outdoor spaces, participating in community, having family, all of that good stuff. All right, Cameron Burrell asked, what made you decide to go tiny? That is kind of a complicated question. So when I was younger, think 15-year-old Alexandria in high school, I had a Pinterest board. It had tiny homes all over it, like the on a trailer tiny home that you would go park someplace on a piece of land. And that was my dream for a really long time. I actually, in community college, before I went to university, even took a sustainable environmental design class where I was designing tiny homes out of sustainable materials and trying to develop these micro communities. So it's always been on my mind, and I guess it's just morphed over time. Once I realized how expensive land was, I found the van life community. And again, that was late in high school, and I just felt like it wasn't something that was accessible to me. I thought about purchasing a van and building it out before I went to university, thinking I could live around town and save on rent, and even calculated it down to the average cost of rent versus building out a van, and realized that I would throw away probably $15,000 to $20,000 in rent in the town that I went to school in, and unfortunately ended up doing that because at the time I was just too nervous about where I would park and all of the questions people have when they first get into this lifestyle. So, long story, but now I'm here. Off-Grid Homestead asks, I'm liking the daily vlogs, wondering how you're liking them and if you'll continue to do them. Not long term, this is a December thing only, guys. I'm so sorry, but it is a lot of work, as enjoyable as it is. I would be interested in your 2023 travel plans and also why you choose winter. So an update here for you all. I, at the beginning, I think, of fall, winter, was mentioning that I might not go south this year and I might just try to stay up north. And I'm not abandoning those plans necessarily, but a big reason that I was going to do that was because I love skiing and snowboarding, and I figured I would get maybe even a part-time job, find some community, put down some roots for a little while, ski and snowboard since that's only like a 4-month venture out of the year, and then the rest of the year I would be traveling, but always living in the truck. Now, with the level of renovation that I've had to do, unfortunately, I've decided that it doesn't make sense for me to buy a ski pass, and I'm not yet at the level where I can go backcountry ski and snowboard, nor do I have a community to go do that with. So I've realized that this year might not be the year for me to choose winter. So I think what's probably going to happen instead, a lot of my belongings are still up in Oregon, is that I'm going to finish the camper here, go back up to get my things, probably sell and donate a lot of my stuff that might not fit, and then reassess. If it's too late in winter, I will probably start to head south, or at least go to a more temperate winter. I don't necessarily need to leave the snow, but if I'm not enjoying it for recreational purposes, there's not really a big reason to stay and be cold and wet all of the time. But yeah, most likely I'll end up somewhere like Utah, Nevada, California this winter. And then hopefully for future seasons, I will be in a better position to get back to the winter sports that I love. Oh, and 2023 travel plans, I think this is a separate video that I'm going to make, but I will loosely say that I'm doing some international travel, some more long hiking, and a lot of stateside exploring now that I'm hoping that this will be our long-term home and we won't constantly be rushing around trying to get things fixed. I'm really excited to slow down a little bit, travel a bit slower, and really get deeper into the communities and the places that I've actually already visited. Laura Hull asks, I'd love to know what's happening with your charity organization. What a good question, Laura. So as you guys know, I've been in a bit of a chaotic living situation since June when I got back on the road with my bus and it started breaking down weekly. With that said, running a charity organization that is based on guiding backpacking and camping trips in different parts around the West is really tricky when I don't have a reliable means of transportation or housing. And it also got really expensive, if I'm being honest, because that charity organization, though it was in the positive, I was trying and had the intention in the future to keep it as low or no cost as possible, which meant that as the founder, I was shouldering some of the costs, like gas, getting Tara a place to stay when she couldn't come with us, food, paying for a second co-host, etc. And it just got to a point where it was no longer sustainable this year, and I really needed to focus on putting my own oxygen mask on first, making sure we were good before I could continue to lead trips and serve other people in that way. So as far as the organization goes, it is still alive and well. There is still money in the bank and there is still full intention of leading trips again in the future. But I really need us to have a stable home and means of transportation before I can start planning those things again. Because again, I would hate to promise something to people and then not be able to give them that because of shortcomings on a personal front on my behalf. Lost Wander asks, love following the new build. Can't wait to see the end results. do you plan on touring the East Coast, or are you staying strictly on the western side of the country? Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I've been having fun sharing it, even when things don't go as planned. And to answer your question, I do have hopes, possibly next year, but if not the year after, of doing a bit of like North Midwest, Northeast. I don't know necessarily how the regions are, but I'm looking to potentially do the Superior Trail, which is a trail that goes around part of the lakes. I would love to go to Vermont and New Hampshire and places where the trees really change colors and explore, from what I've heard, a vastly different culture and community than what I have out here in the West. But ultimately, I do love the West. I love the mountains. I love the diversity. I know it exists in the East too. Please don't come for me. But I just really love the West, and ultimately I will always come back out here. I don't feel like I will ever consider being out there long term or permanently, but definitely would love to explore more. Paul Sherman asked, do you have plans of one day buying a piece of land and building a tiny home as a home base for when you're not traveling? I kind of alluded to this earlier. It's definitely something that is on my mind, especially as things in the world feel uncertain. As much as I love traveling and being on the road, exploring new places and the community that's out there, I do know that it's not something that I will do for 30 years. I would love to one day have a partner and a family and a community and a home base, and maybe still travel part of the year or do a bit more international travel in the far future. But in terms of purchasing land now, I'm not quite ready, nor do I know where exactly that I would want to live. So a lot of what getting back on the road in this truck camper is going to be, for me at least, is more intentional travel, really getting into the places that I go, staying there for a bit longer, absorbing the culture and the community, and trying to find places that I do love that I might want to call home base one day. And in terms of building a home or buying a home, I am not in a position to do either right now. I'm, of course, as you guys know, I love building things and I love a good challenge. So I could totally see myself purchasing a plot of land and building a home there and learning everything that goes into that. But I've also thought about the position in life that I might be in when that rolls around, and if I had like a young family or a partner or more dogs, anything like that, it might be tricky to build something from the ground up. And so I'd definitely be open to maybe buying something that needs a lot of work for a lower price that gives me something to start with. Lucinda Turnus asks, of all the places you've camped and spent time with, where's your absolute favorite, and will you return there again in your new build? So I have a couple of favorite places. I've already named two of them. Bend, Oregon and Durango, Colorado are definitely top on my list. And then Mammoth Lakes is tied, I think, actually up there too. The Mammoth Bishop Eastern Sierra region. It's actually where I lived when I was this tall. And I absolutely love it there. If I don't go to Bend this winter, I'm probably going to be in the Eastern Sierra a whole lot because it's one of my favorite places in the world. But I think the place that surprised me the most, and I'm pretty sure this is a question that somebody else sent in, so I'll get deeper into it then, but Stanley, Idaho was absolutely breathtaking. I was there in May, I believe it was late May, and it was lush and green and everything was so alive. The rivers were wide, the community was vibrant, and the peaks were jagged. All of my favorite things in one place, and definitely not something that I expected from the land of potatoes. I don't know, if you're not from Idaho, I feel like most people don't know very much about it. So I definitely would love to return there again. My rig is actually named after Stanley, if you didn't know that. And yeah, I'll be going back there and all the other places that I just named with this rig for sure. Aaron Riddell asked, you're an old pro at this lifestyle by now. Not compared to some people, but what is your best piece of advice for someone who wants to get started living on the road? I think you just need to go for it. And I mentioned earlier that I even had some hesitations back in college, for example, when I first was thinking about getting into this lifestyle. And I think you just have to decide that it's what you want and commit to it like anything else. Whether you're moving to a new place, switching a job, leaving a relationship, or starting something new, like at some point you just have to decide that that's what you want and you need to put your whole heart into it. I think on the more practical side though, once you've made that decision, having a job that allows you to work remote or having the funds to exist on the road without that is really helpful, especially if you can do it before you make that jump. Because I will say it would be pretty tricky to move into a rig of some sort and then figure out the job situation if you didn't have something already lined up. could be a little sketchy, but maybe you're fine with that level of risk. I would also say do as much research as you can about the type of rig that you're thinking you want to get into. As you guys have seen, I've already been in 3 in a year and a half, and it's not necessarily because I have commitment issues. More on that later maybe, but it's really just because it's taken me a while to truly figure out my style of travel, the things that I need versus what I just maybe want or would be nice to have, and refine my lifestyle on the road. It can look so many different ways, so figuring that out is going to save you a lot of time and headaches down the road, and could also prevent you from having to do what I've been doing, which is rig hopping and trying to figure it out along the way. It's not the worst thing, but it's also not that convenient. Steve Buchanan asks, when you started your current build, how did you map out where everything was going to go, or are you just replacing the current with new and everything going back to the original spot? I will say that this was actually designed fairly well in terms of the amount of storage they put in, the layout, the preservation of a walkway, and just having it be a livable space for more than one person. That said, I will be changing a few things just based on Tara and my lifestyle and our bodies and our needs. I don't need quite as much storage as was in there, at least that's what I'm telling myself. And so I will be taking out one of the cabinets, but reinforcing the structure elsewhere, don't worry. I'm also going to be widening the bench seating area because it was just too narrow for Tara to comfortably sleep on. And so there were a couple of times where she got up and it was just like an awkward width. And so she kind of stumbled and fell off. Things like that will definitely be changed, as well as like the location of the fridge and my closet, how I have things oriented around the rig. But overall, they actually did a really great job. I don't have too many complaints, and especially being mindful of needing to reinforce that fiberglass shell since it's 2 pieces that kind of like meet together. It's really important. So I'm gonna try my best to maintain that support and not change too much. Adam Hinckley asked, what is your future plan with the tiny homes? Are you enjoying it so far? I kind of answered this earlier. I do really enjoy it. I love living tiny, and in fact get kind of overwhelmed when I think about having more space. I definitely downsized from the bus, so as you can tell, I like living tiny, and I am not trying to not live tiny in the near future. And then in terms of future plans, I think owning a home or a piece of land with a smaller home or a reasonably sized home for me and a partner or future family would be wonderful, but no plans on that yet. All right, Honey I Roam, thank you guys for the question. I love following your truck camper build as well. Asked, ooh, we love a good Q&A. Me too. We will be tuning in. What is the most underrated place you've ever traveled? Again, kind of answered this with Stanley, but I'll just expand a bit. I love Stanley, Idaho with my whole heart. I was not expecting it. I met a friend up there for the first time. We went backpacking, and in my mind, I was just going to the mountains. But what I was met with were the most pristine alpine lakes, the biggest rivers full of, I'm sure, fish, which I would love to get into this coming summer, and just really warm, kind people. So definitely underrated, highly recommend, especially if you like hot springs. I haven't even mentioned the hot springs, but there are like 9 hot springs within a 50-mile radius. It's a gorgeous area surrounded by even more awesome, beautiful places. So highly recommend Stanley. Beach in a van. Thank you, Kelly, for your question. This is your 3rd build. I know, don't remind me. I'm interested to know your headspace now that you've done this twice already. What is easier? What is challenging? Super proud of you. Thank you. For those of you guys who don't know, Beach in a Van, my friend Kelly just started her own channel actually. So if you want to see more like beginning early van life content, I'd highly recommend that you go follow her. She built out a Ford Transit, and we actually met on a Herterra trip, the first Herterra trip that I led to Big Sur last year. So all of that said, thank you, Kelly. My headspace is I want to get this done as quickly but as well as possible. I do miss the road, but I also value this being our long-term home, I hope. And so I'm trying to really strike the balance of speed and quality, which in the bus, it was definitely quality, but I did have a tight timeline, and there were some things that I was like, I don't need it to look perfect. We're just going to move forward. I'm not that concerned about it. And this, I'm not going to say that I'll be a perfectionist about it, but once I start the actual build process, I do want to make it look nice, and I do want it to feel like a pouring of love from my soul, I guess. That sounds really cheesy, but I want it to feel homey. I want it to feel like me. And I also want it to have the things that I've come to know that I want or need on the road, because I want this to be our long-term home. And I could totally see myself for the first time. This is not something I felt with my van or my bus, but I could see Tara and I being in this until we do decide to settle down, either on a piece of land or buying a home one day. And so I want this to be able to last us through that massive transition. I definitely feel more connected to this build than my other two, which is kind of funky considering how unexpected and terrible a lot of it's gone so far. But I got a soft spot in my heart for it. Frederick Julian, don't know if you'll feel okay, but gots to know. Is there a significant other in your life besides Tara? Well, thank you for acknowledging that. Tara is definitely my number one lady, but I do not currently have a partner. I am single. I have been for almost 2 years now, which is crazy to think about. And it has been some of the most enriching, fun, focus on improving me in my lifetimes of my life. And what I'm telling myself now is that even though I am starting to open myself up to the thought of having somebody else in my life, I now enjoy my own company so much that I'm not in a rush. And if that person comes along, I'll be super stoked to welcome them into my life, but I'm no longer seeking another person to complete me. I finally feel at peace with myself. I love myself, and yeah, I guess it'll just be hard to find somebody who makes my life even better than it already is, which is not to sound egotistical, but just I love my life. I've worked really hard to create this for myself, and I'm not really willing to sacrifice much anymore because I want to do whatever I can to keep my own happiness and health at the forefront, as well as Tara's. And so someone's going to really have to come in and it be the right time, right place, right location, right lifestyle for it to work. All right, moving over to Instagram. Maria M. Lafour. Is it hard to live on the road with a dog? I'll say it's different, but it's not hard. And you have to know what you're getting yourself into. I would say if you get a dog for the road and you've never had one before, that might be a rough adjustment just because they're a big responsibility and a lot of work, especially if you get a young dog that requires a lot of play and attention and training right off the bat. Obviously, they require those things throughout their life, but I'd say the puppy phase is definitely the hardest. Otherwise, it's just adjusting your life to kind of revolve around your dog, which for me is great. I love my dog. We go to the dog park, we go on hikes, we go to the river. I pretty much give her all of my attention every day, and I absolutely love it, and we're both thriving. But if you're someone who wants to leave the dog behind a lot or go to concerts, go out all the time, it might be a little bit more tough because they're probably going to be cooped up a little bit more than the maybe average van life dog. I don't know. It just depends on your lifestyle and the pup. If the pup is super chill with just hanging around and not doing a lot of outdoorsy stuff, then they could thrive being like in the van. But personally, I have a super active outdoorsy dog, and so my lifestyle now caters to that, and thankfully it matches what I was doing prior. So I guess it's less of it, is it hard to live on the road, and more of just having a dog that is suited for the road and your lifestyle and feeling like you have that bond before getting on the road, or getting a dog that you know will thrive regardless. I don't feel like I answered that very well. I love it. I don't regret it. It's so much better than being solo, I think. Mr. Jimbolio, what are you planning for onboard water and power? So power, I'm going to be doing at least one 250 watt solar panel on the roof. I'm thinking about putting 2 additional 100 watt panels on the sides of the hatch, but I'm not completely sold on that idea yet, just for aerodynamics and do I actually need that amount of power? I mean, I have a 200 amp hour lithium ion battery that's going to be in the camper, like the house batteries, and it'll also be fed by a battery to battery charger from the truck's alternator. I did upgrade the truck's alternator from, I think it was just a 60 amp stock alternator to 130 amp. And the biggest reason, well, 2 reasons, was one, I didn't want to kill my battery while charging my house batteries. But I also have a 1000 watt Jackery power station, and while I drive, I typically charge that. And so I needed something that could handle charging both things at the same time while driving. So that way when I got to the camper, my house battery could feed my fridge, my lights, kind of the basic things around the house. And then my jack rig could be for lean times when maybe we don't have a lot of sunlight, we don't have a lot of power coming in, and I still need to charge my laptop, my phone, etc. So kind of a combination for power. And then for water, I'm planning on just doing a very simple 16-gallon freshwater tank. I had a 40-gallon in the bus and I never filled it more than halfway. I had a 24 in the van and I think it lasted about 2 weeks at a time. So I'm trying to go somewhere in the middle, something that fits the dimensions because it's going to go in a really specific place. So I needed something that fit well, and 16 gallons seems to do the trick. All right, bus bike, are you going to do a rear seat delete, back seat storage unit? And you also asked about travel plans. So rear seat delete is something that I've been really heavily considering. That said, I don't think I will unless I need to. And the biggest reason there isn't that I want to give away some of that valuable storage space, but it's really just a matter of then storing those back seats. And ideally, I won't have a storage unit after building this out. I don't know if that's super reasonable. I might still need to have one just because things like my bike and other off-season gear, it'd be nice to not have to carry them with me all the time. Travel plans I touched on earlier, visiting some of those places that I love. I'm gonna do a whole video on this for 2023, but I'll mention as well, I really wanna get to Montana this coming summer, and I would love to drive to Alaska one day. You also asked, sorry, I missed your third question. Bus Bike also asked a great question. Do you regret buying your camper and should you have paid less? I do not regret it. I think that to get this camper, which why I was so stuck on it now seems hilarious because I thought it was going to be waterproof. But to get this camper was like an impossible feat by all standards. They made it for 2 years. It's extremely difficult to find something that fits in a 6-foot bed, and that was something I definitely wanted. I did not want to get a bigger truck with a bigger bed and like longer travel. So I don't regret that aspect, but I definitely do feel some type of way about spending $12,500 on it. I was not under the impression that this thing was rotted completely, and I'll give the previous owner some credit. I don't know that they knew either, but had I known the level of damage, I definitely would have offered them less, maybe even down to like $7,000 or $8,000, which is just over half of what I paid. And the reason for that is these campers are sold at a premium because they are known for being watertight. And that was not only not the case, but what the previous owner had told me of, you might need to give it a bit of a facelift, was far from the truth. I had to completely gut the sketchy electrical, the rotted floor, the mold-infested walls. I don't think that he had any concept for how wrecked this thing was. And if I had known, I either would have passed up on it, honestly, or only paid like $7,000 or $8,000. And if he would have stuck to the 12, I probably would have said no. Basically, nomads. Thanks guys for the question. Where did your building experience come from? My dad, most of it, building out my first van. That was a huge learning experience from me. But prior to that, I basically just helped around home renovations growing up. My dad worked in product management and construction, and so he has a ton of knowledge and has been super helpful throughout all of my builds. But otherwise, it's just been a lot of learning as I go, learning from past builds and learning from my mistakes, like with my windows. Now I know better and I won't make that mistake next time. Dorit asks, how do you deal with a constant struggle? I used to be great at it, but I'm struggling. Dorit is a fellow solo female builder, so if you are not already following her, I think her channel is Just Dorit, like Just Do It, but her name is Dorit. Anyways, great channel. You guys should definitely follow it. She's remodeling her bus, and I think this is her 3rd full build, so another very knowledgeable person. But how do I deal with the struggle? A lot of times I just muscle it. I think I've gotten very used to things not really working out like I think they're going to, taking a lot longer than I thought and just rolling with it, which is not very helpful, but it's all that I know how to do, honestly, at this point. And I know that with my first build, there were days where I would get so frustrated and so defeated. There were a couple times where I even just left. Like I was building at my parents' house and I packed everything up and I just left for like weeks at a time because I just could not manage the stress and the overwhelm that was coming with building. And I think what I've learned from those experiences is that it's always going to be there. Going away, to avoid those problems. Unfortunately, does not get rid of them. I know you know that, but yeah, sometimes you just have to kind of knuckle down and get it done. And taking breaks, like the other day when I was really frustrated about my floor flooding, I took the night off and I went and baked cinnamon rolls and I hung out with my family and I took a lot of deep breaths. And I think just taking care of yourself in those situations is the most important thing, because that's the only constant you have is yourself. So hope you're taking care of yourself, buddy. And thanks for the question. All right, Yuma Peggy asked, who is helping you? A nod to my parents. They definitely help me out when I need an extra hand. My dad has helped me out in all of my builds, troubleshooting and figuring things out that I don't have the expertise for. But I would say most of my like van, bus, truck camper specific help comes from YouTube. So that's just a nod to anybody who wants to do this on their own completely. Maybe you live by yourself or you don't have parents that are able to help you. You can totally learn all of this stuff online. And so go to YouTube University, just like I have. And I guess just School of Hard Knocks. You learn by making mistakes and you learn how to help yourself. Zeus the Super Duty. I bet your truck is really cool. When will you get to building out the Tundra? Of course you're asking about the truck. I love that. Sorry, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. Will you have videos on that? Yes, is the short answer. Those videos will probably be coming next week, because after I get this thing waterproofed, the next focus is the truck before I drive down to Southern California to get upgraded suspension put on. I will be doing the front suspension with my dad, as well as the wheels and tires that already came in. So I'm super excited to show you the transformation there. And then I'm also putting on a new aftermarket bumper, rear and front actually, for clearance, and then to protect the back a little bit more, just because I've already run into instances where the truck has slid out a bit and scratched the side of the camper. So I have some, like, I don't think a roll cage is proper, but roll bars that are going up on the side of the truck, and I'll be sharing that entire experience and process with you guys here as well. TerraTac1 asks, where are you from originally? Santa Cruz Mountains. That is kind of a location between the Bay Area and Santa Cruz. Up in the hills where we chopped wood to stay warm in the winter. We didn't have AC in the summer, but we'd go down to our above ground basement, and it's where I learned how to work hard. My dad taught me that I don't love manual labor, so it's funny that I do what I do now. And I had this small little mountain community that I hated at the time. I really wished that I was closer to my friends, had more of a social life, had the new iPhone, all the things that kids want to be like other people. And it's funny because now I look back on that and it's all that I want in life, I think, is just a small community, being in the mountains with pretty views and big trees. Sadisum asks, do you use all of your own tools to renovate, or do you have to borrow things? I borrow all of the tools that I use, but I borrow them from my wonderful parents. So my dad has an extensive library of tools, again, coming from a project management construction background. And I'm so lucky to be able to use all of them, because I cannot even begin to express how helpful it is to have the right tool for a job. So I can use a table saw, a miter saw, a skill saw, a jigsaw, the screw guns, the drills, the routers, all of those things are what help me accomplish my build. And if I were to purchase those things on my own, would probably cost, I don't even know, $10,000 to $15,000. Not to mention places to store them and then where I would put them afterwards. So yes, I'm grateful to be able to borrow all my tools and use all of my dad's tools. And if you don't have the ability to do that, I would highly recommend looking into a maker's space, which was something that I was considering doing if I wasn't able to come back home and do my build here. Like if I was stuck up in Oregon, I was looking at maker spaces, which aren't cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than purchasing all of your own tools and storing them somewhere afterwards. All right, and the last question, Asai Acosta, are you single? Yes, I answered this earlier, but I'm very single and very happy to be at this point in my life. Well, I think it was perfect timing. The moon has officially risen after a long day of building and answering all of your questions, which again, I appreciate so much. I know this community has grown quite a bit over the past few months, and especially with this build. So I just want to thank you all again for being here, for participating, for giving back to me in the form of supportive comments and love for Terra. We really appreciate it and hope to see you tomorrow. Bye.